So why C.D. Cohen said he would do it? I don't know. I mentioned the name to somebody. Who? I don't know. I tell you where it was. It's a very nice place. It's in the Lake District. Southwest Lake District.
South Lakes.
Southwest. No, there was no zoo anyway.
That's the Barrow.
It was no. Oh, you're right. It was quite near Barrow. Yeah. What's it?
One of the most famous.
I thought you were like an expert on Lake District geography.
Barrow last year. That's why.
Right. So what do you do? Drank the water.
You took off the coat, put it to the side.
Drank the water. Oh, very good.
Coca-Cola shares went down $4 billion.
You're joking. Wow, that's a Musa Haskell. No, the shares. So I'll sell off all my shares very quickly.
Who did that?
I don't realize. They say that. I don't realize. They say those shares prices have been. So went down. So I don't know.
Right, the question is next week how much lower it will have been. That's a very nice story. It's like one of these Nachman Zotzers or yes. That's an interesting story, no? What do you tie? It's a basically it should be on. Is there anybody complaining that it's not on or nobody's complaining it's not on? I think all being recorded now. Yeshua, now that you said the story, it's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So people on YouTube will know about it. So the shares will go down even more. So you must quickly sell those shares.
No, now it's
time to buy.
Yeah.
No, wait until the YouTube hits.
It was a whole thing because he's going to buy shares now.
Oh. I say it's right to a certain extent. I mean, okay, everybody here is drinking Coke. I shouldn't say that. Oh, hot water. We said, well, come on, hot water.
He's an athlete. He's 36, 37. He's playing well into almost 40 and he's still at the height of his...
Not as strong as we are, of course. No, near.
He's doing more than that.
You walked or you sat by the lake?
Walked. There's no lake. In the whole area, there's no lake. That's a mile in the Chasson, a mile that there's much less going. Because there's much less people, but there's no lake. There's space to walk. Walked. No lake. It's very interesting. I have to show the map one day. I found it interesting. I've never been there before. I've been there. We're up to Samach Vav Amud Aleph, 6 lines from the top. I'm going to go back into Shem. Did you put those 4 pictures up?
Yes.
But very briefly, if we set aside all the animals for the Yom Kippur Avodah, and then they all get lost, and we get a new set, and then we find the original set, what is the halacha? Anybody remember? Again, you chose all the sets, the entire set of animals, then they all ran away, they all got lost. So you got another set. And then you found the original set. Anybody know what's the halacha to the original set? What do we do with them? No, we don't graze. Anybody know what you do with them? What? No, we don't. They all die. They all die. That's what? No. That's the most questions. Why did it all die? That's the most questions. Why did it all die? Elo mavova. Gzeiro, top of 6 lines from the top. Gzeiro mishum takola. The reason it will die is if they don't, people will use them during the year. And the problem with using them during the year is that the Chatas of Yom Kippur. In Makdish, nowadays there's no Mikdash, not allowed to make Hekdash. Vein Ma'avichi, not allowed to make Evichin. Vein Machrimi, not allowed to make Nixachem. Zman Hazeh. Vein Hekdash, Ve'erich Ve'echin. Behemo Te'oker, an animal which be killed. Perus Ksus Ve'kelim Yilkvu, Sugar Moldy. Moris Ve'kleim Matchois, Yolich Hanol Yamamelach. You're not allowed to be Makdish anything nowadays. I mentioned this once before. I once said this from a Rav, that he was a camp Rav. And there was boys bullying a certain boy. It was a certain boy that was getting bullied. He was getting his items, like people as a trick would take away his towel and hide it or something. So what did he do? He was makdish all of his items. Can you imagine in the middle of the summer holidays? And suddenly this Shiloh crops up. There was a boy in camp, a 13, 14-year-old boy, and people wanted to tease him, like boys like to do, and they were pinching his towel or his swimming trunks and putting it away. He didn't want it to happen anymore. He got frustrated. So what did he say? All my items that belong to me should become hekdash. Go to Beis Hamikdash. Happened about 10, 15 years ago. So what's the halacha? The halacha is he shouldn't have done it. The question is, well, now what? So the halacha is for the record that since there's no Beis Hamikdash, Chazal will make sure that you can redeem it on the smallest coin as long as the Shabbat put up. That's what they did. They redeemed everything on 20 pence, and then they did the 20 pence and that's destroyed. What?
That stuff's worth even less.
So that, I mean, okay, no, they redeemed it to 20. No, but his intention was he want people to touch his things. Okay. So the Mishnah over here says that what you should do is, what it says, how do you get rid of the animal? You lock it in the room when it dies. So the Gemara explains like this. Let's explain again. If a person sets aside all the korbanos for Yom Kippur, and then they got lost, that was the first set called set A. They all got lost. And then he chose another set, set B, and then set A all reappear. So the halacha is that set A have to die. Question is why? Because you might come to use it during the year, and it's a chatos for Yom Kippur, you can't use it during the year. Says the Gemara, Takola demai. What exactly could go wrong? If you might bring it as a korban, every single animal that we say, let it graze, and wait for it to get a mum, and then redeem it and buy it an oiler. Why do we let it graze? You should be chayshish, bring it as a korban. You might come to work with it to shiv it. Every single animal as well. You're not busy with it. Here the Gemara is the final answer to a question which we've been dealing for over a daf. And this is the final answer. And it's a very nice answer to understand the difference why these animals we have to destroy more than any other animal. Why? Most times when you get an animal, what we do is there's something wrong with it, and therefore it will never be brought as a korban. For example, there was a chatos, the owner had a chatos, and what happens? The owner died. So now the owner can't bring it as a korban anymore. So it's not viable for a korban. Since it's not viable for a korban, we're not chayshish anything will go bad. But over here we're talking about where you lost the set of Yom Kippur korbanos, then you found them again, and the intention was to leave them for next year. But that means you actually thinking to yourself, these are good korbanos. So your mind is focused to bring them as a korban. Therefore, they are much greater danger that you will bring it as a korban during the year, and therefore you have to make them die. When an animal has no chance of bringing a korban, we're not chayshish. When there's a chance of bringing it as a korban, we're more chayshish. Says the Gemara, "Takola asma tanoi." It's machlekes tanoi. The Tanya chada. We had one Beis. Pesach shlei kol v'rishon. Pesach you didn't bring it on the first Pesach, which is the 14th of Nisan. You call v'sheni. You should bring it on the 14th of Iyar. You didn't bring it v'sheni. Let's say you couldn't bring it on the sheni for whatever reason. You call v'shana haba. You should bring it the next year. That means you've got to bring it this year. It didn't work out. Bring it for Pesach sheni. Not Pesach sheni. Bring it the next year. Anybody have a very strong question on this? Oh, very good. What's the question? Explain. Oh, Pesach has to be within a year old. How is it possible to bring it? Again, I separated before the first Pesach, which was, let's say I separated when, let's say, call it the 13th of Nisan. I was going to bring it the next day. I didn't manage to, whatever reason, I was too far away from Yerushalayim. I was going to bring it Pesach Sheni. I never managed then either. So then the Beis says, bring it the next year Pesach. What's the problem? It'll be over a year old. Anybody got an answer to that? Oh, at least somebody. The answer, we'll come to it in a minute. Okay. You can't bring it. My lab, it's a color pligi. The more suggests the machlekes is, we chayshish that you'll bring it during the year as a takola. That's the pshat. That's the reason. That's the argument. Look, the kulam lo chashin a takola. I'll explain again because I said it yesterday and it's not so easily done. It's very ancient machlekes. There's machlekes, Rabbi and Chachamim. How do you define a year? Shittas Rabbi is how do you define a year? Very good. 365 days. A year is 365 days. What difference does it make? How long is a year? For a few differences. For example, a sheep has to be less than a year old. A chatos has to be less than a year old. Where else does it make a difference a year? No, unfortunately not there. No, and not planted trees. No, that also doesn't. That goes according to the planting year. It's not every degree. It's not 365 days. If I sell you a property in a walled city, you've got only 1 year. I've got only 1 year to buy it back. So according to Rabbi, it's always 365 days. The Chachamim say it's 12 months. How many days is 12 months? 354 days. So according to Rabbi, it is actually possible to bring the Korban Pesach Again, let's imagine you've got to bring the Korban Pesach, you separated, as we said, on 13th of Nisan. A year later, it's only 354 days later, you've still got another 11 days for the sheep. You haven't actually got 11 days because to separate it, the sheep has to be a minimum of how old? 8 days. So you've got 8 days plus 354 days, you've got 362 days. It's only 3 days from its first birthday. But it is theoretically possible to have 2 Pesachs within 1 year. So therefore it's possible. I should go to the Chachamim, but they say it's 12 months. It's never going to happen. It says, well, the Beis says the same question regarding money. If you separated money for Korban Pesach, the machlekes is regarding money, and then there's no question about being over a year old. If you separated money for Korban Pesach, there's machlekes regarding takala, and that is the machlekes Rabbi and that the machlekes on the Beis is are we choishes for takala or not. We'll finish now with the whole sugi without going back to the Avodah Yom Kippur. I want to just summarize where we're up to. The Kohen Gadol, after having all night doing what? What did he do all night? He learned or he listened to Shiurim, and every so often he would stand on the cold floor to wake himself up. And if you remember, there was a Mishnah that every so often he'd ask him to do a press up just to keep him awake. And other people would learn next to him to keep him awake. Finally, the earliest chance, they start the Avodah with which clothes? Golden clothes, big days of. What the Avodah does it do the big days of? The regular Avodah, which basically is Korban Tamid, the Keteras, and the Menorah. That's the normal Korbanos of every day. After that, he changes into white clothes. Then, first he does one vidui on the cow. Then he goes and does the lottery between the 2 he-goats, which was our previous Mishnah, that the 2 he-goats have to look at 4 things. The 2 he-goats have to be the same. What are the 4 things?
All at the same time.
Both at the same time, from the same person, the same. Yes, height, money, and color. Right. Is it bought at the same time, bought from the same person? I think it's bought from the same person. It's also bought from the same time. Okay. So the 4 things. He did the lottery. Afterwards, he went back to the cow. He did another vidui. Then what he did was, what did he do after the second vidui? He shechted it. Then after he shechted it, he got somebody else to stir the blood. He went and took the keteros, which was a whole procedure. We'll just call it the keteros. He took ashes, he took keteros, he put in the kodesh kedoshim. Then he takes the blood, which he shechted before the keteros, and he sprinkles it 1 up, 7 down the kodesh kedoshim. Then he goes out to shech the soil, which was from the lottery, does 1 up, 7 down the kodesh kedoshim. Then he does both outside the kodesh kedoshim, and then both onto the mizbeach hazov. On the peiches does them separately, and he's both one separately, and the mizbeach hazov he mixes them. And now he's finished with, they pours out the rest of the blood on the Yisod HaMizbeach, either the west or the south. And now he's finished with the avodah of the pow and the he-goat of the pnim, the inside. And now he's going to go to the he-goat, which is going to go la'azos. Now, to anybody, this is very hard to remember. We had a machlikas tanoim. What is the he-goat mechapa for? Very good.
All the various besides Kohanim.
Yeah, so the Kohanim, what?
Because they've already been mechuppah in the second.
Oh, very good, I don't think you remember. Again, one shitta is all averos of the whole of Klal Yisrael. All the averos of the whole of Klal Yisrael. Let's get it clear. All the averos of the whole Klal Yisrael, except for what? Tumas Mikdash v'Kodosho. That means either going to Beis Mikdash from your tummy or eating some Beis Mikdash from your tummy. That everybody agrees goes to the cow and the he-goat which went inside. But all other averos, the whole of Klal Yisrael goes on the soil. Alternatively, all the averos, except for the Tumas Mikdash v'Kodosho, we'll always leave those out because those were the other kabbonos. Except for Kohanim. And then the Kohanim, they had the avoid, they got kapor. If you remember, according to Rabbi Yehuda says that what happened was they got a kapor, I think it was Rabbi Yehuda. What? Because they got 2 things. They got 2 things because there was the sprinkling of the blood on the inside plus the vidus. That's the 2 things. Okay. He makes a video on it to misvad and Yoma. Honor Hashem chotu avu pashu. Now, if you look in the back, he changes the order. I'm not going to stretch your memory so far back. The fact is a machlek, because actually I just looked today in the Mishnah V'or, but he brings this discussion. For example, we say, I can't remember the words of the Malkinu. Because the question is like this: do you go from the least severe to the most severe, which is the way our Mishnah says? Chotu is by mistake. Ovu means on purpose. Bosh means to rebel. That's one explanation. Or what's the other one? That's very hard to remember. Most common, very good. And then if it's the most common, what's the most common? No. And I find it very strange. Ovon is the most, because that's bemazed. Then Pesha and then Chatos. Yes. The reason is because people generally don't do Pithi. I don't know. That's the law says the previously read it. So the Bach changes the Gilsa to fit it in with the other shitta there in order to reconcile the two Mishnahs together. We mentioned the time, the Rambam that goes all the way down to the Shulchan Aruch. Which order do you go according to the most common to the least severe? Okay. Do you think that fits in according to the shitta that the Kalim are miskapah with it or not miskapah with it? They are miskapah with it. Why? Or you could say not miskapah with it because it doesn't mention Kalim. Just says Beis Yisrael. Yeah. Ono Hashem, again, the Bach changes it to Bashem. It's also Machlekes. It's Machlekes. We had it earlier, Yerushalmi Babli, whether you say Ono Hashem or Bashem. Ono Hashem means please Hashem. Ono Bashem means please through the name of Rachamim. Again, the Bach changes it because he wants to fit it in with the other Mishnah previously. So, והקרנים ואומרים בעזור כשישים לשם המפרש שיועץ ביקר גודל יקרים משלחים נפלו מהפנים ואומרים ברוך שם כבוד מלכות לעולם ועד. They bowed down. How many times did they bow down for this video? Anybody remember? 3. 3 times they had to do an entire bowing down. And this I want to show you the picture. We're not used to this kind of bowing down. I don't see it very often. You bow down, you spread your hands and your legs and you're flat out. Prostrate it's called, I think, in English. But first you have to do kriya. First you bend your knees to the floor, then you put the head onto the floor, and then you spread out completely. That's how they did it. And they did it 3 times. What were the 3 times? Let's go very quickly how he started off. He said, Ono Hashem, that's the name of Hashem. And then Ono Hashem Kappa No the second time. And he said, if they Hashem Tito, so 3 times they would bow down. They would give it over to somebody that would walk the Solar Azal, so they had to walk a long way. Anybody is permitted. The Kohanim didn't allow, they were racists. And they would say, only Kohanim are good enough. We can't allow Yisroel to walk with it. So they would only allow the Kohanim to walk with it. Once Arsala took it to do was Yisroel, there's a big machlekas. What's Rabbi trying to say? Either he's trying to say that no such thing, that in fact Yisraelim did it, and it's not true that what you're saying that Kohanim took it upon themselves, because sometimes Yisraelim did it. Or he's trying to say, no, you're right, that Kohanim didn't need to do it. The proof being that once Yisroel did it. Okay. The Kevosh also learned if they are bavim. They made a special ramp. Can you see this ramp? A very interesting ramp, directly from the Beis Hamikdash all the way out of Yerushalayim, a massive ramp. Can you imagine how big the ramp must have been? All the way out of Yerushalayim. So they would pull off his hair. That means they had a corrupt understanding of what HaKadosh was. They were trying to do is vizim makdimim. They would pull out their hair in order to get it to go fast. Why were they keen to get it to go fast? Because as we mentioned, this Sami Shalech took a lot of Averos. And they wanted their bears to go quicker and quicker. There's a machlekes rishonim, whose hair did they pull out? The walker or the goat? And what's the difference? Anybody say? Anybody chaps this deserves 2 lechaims. What's the difference?
Easy to go, so easy to get it going.
No, I bet more of a lach difference. Now, lach is pulling the goat of a hair of a goat is goises. It's a deraisa. Pulling the hair of a human being is not a goises. Even though it actually is also to abundant to have a haircut of Shabbos. But it's not the real lesser of goises because most people don't use their hair.
You're not doing the hair then.
You're not allowed to have a haircut on Shabbos.
So, yeah, you're not doing it then.
Yeah, we saw, but here they were doing a proper Issa Deraisa, pulling out. That is shearing. So it's it could be the over Issa Deraisa just to get the he-goat to go faster. Okay. Says the Gemara, he didn't mention that Kohanim. If he didn't mention the Kohanim, says the Gemara, man, Tana, Rabbi Yehuda, the Yehuda, ma yesh lo kapor v'sav yishtalech. The holds they do. Sorry, not like I said. Rabbi Yehuda is one who says that you do get the kapor v'sav yishtalech. And this is Gemara that what Shai said. This is what the Mishnah says. Klali Yisrael. The question is, does the word Klali Yisrael include all of Klali Yisrael, or does it not include the Kohanim? Because at the end of the day, they had their own separate kapor. So you've got no right from our Mishnah whether it's like a Yehuda or not like a Yehuda. And still a machloikas as to whether the Kohanim got a kapor through the Samshalach. Todu Rabbanan, Ish lachshes azor. Pasuk says, Yisholach yad ish iti. Ish is to include a zor, a non-Kohen. Iti. The word iti, top of Samach Vav on the base, top line, the word iti just means the right time. So from there we dash many droshes. It's not new droshes, it's all the same drosha. That it has to be the time. That time is what establishes. Shemizuman, he should be prepared. That means there was a mitzvah to tell him the day before Yom Kippur, you are the one who's going to be the one to walk the Samshalach. Iti, va'afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Iti va'afilu b'Tumah, even if it was Tomei. Now we're examining this brisa. Ish nachshes azor pshita. Of course, why should he not be allowed to? At the end of the day, pushing off the he-goat. Cause kapara, and kapara is something only Kohanim are allowed to, so a Yisrael is allowed to do it, even though it is a kapara. There's no issa to walk with the he-goat on Shabbos. If you want to walk with the goat Shabbos, what's the issa? So why do you need a special drosha to tell you that you're allowed to do it on Shabbos? What issa could it be? Answers the Gemara, if the he-goat gets no well, you're allowed to carry the he-goat. Now, carrying a he-goat is the issa of mitzvah. And therefore, you might have thought that you shouldn't be allowed to. So it tells us that even if the he-goat gets not well, you're allowed to carry it even on Shabbos. Now, carrying a live animal, we actually had it in Shabbos, is a machlokes tanoim whether there's any issa. We pass the chadus asma. It says, well, commanded to a living thing is carrying himself. Says the Gemara, when the person is not well and is unable to carry themselves as a chila, and therefore it's not considered chadus asma. It's a very important afkimina. For example, in the town that has no eruv, and you've got that's an elderly person, and they want to be pushed in a wheelchair. So you've got to remember the fact that you were not discussing it is a hitzor, not it's to our bottom maybe. The thing's not plugged in. Is it? Oh no, it is, I'm not sure, sorry. So why? Because a human being is Chanel says that's what. Oh, what about the wheelchair? What's the thing? Why is the wheelchair not on hitzor? It's bottom to the human being. I remember years and years ago, there was no eruv managed, and somebody had a child that wasn't sure, not well. So they asked the Rav what to do. So the Rav said, push them in the buggy to the doctor. I went to the doctor. The doctor gave medication. So tell the child to hold the medication in the buggy. That way it's all a bottle to the thing. But okay, that's important halacha. So let's get the word again clear. They've got the drosha ish iti tells us afilu b'Shabbos. The question is, what in the world would there be an issa on Shabbos? The answer is that even if the he-goat is not well, you can carry it. Says the Gemara, from here we can prove that means we all know that on Yom Tov you're allowed to carry, on Shabbos you're not allowed to carry. What about Yom Kippur? Are you allowed to carry on Yom Kippur? Says Rafram, from here I can prove that you're allowed to carry on Yom Kippur. What's the logic? If it would be forbidden to carry every Yom Kippur, what? Yes, that's how we pass, not like Rafam. You're right, we don't pass like this Rafam. But Rafam held like this. Rafam held that you're allowed to carry on Yom Kippur. What's his proof? If it was forbidden to carry on Yom Kippur, why do we need a special drosha to permit you to carry the he-goat on Shabbos? Anyway, you have a problem, it's Yom Kippur. It's like this. The special drosha ish iti, that even if Yom Kippur happens to be a Shabbos, you're still allowed to carry the he-goat. If every Yom Kippur is forbidden to carry, so it makes no difference whether it's Shabbos or Yom Kippur. So whether Yom Kippur is a Shabbos or not. You've anyway got the issa of Yom Kippur. So beside Yom Kippur, if the whole problem was Yom Kippur, there's no problem of carrying. And besides Shabbos is a problem of carrying, that's when you need a special drosha. Teresis brings a Gemara increases that says that this Gemara stops here. And the Gemara allows this to be, as Ian pointed out, that's very strange because we know that we don't carry on Yom Kippur. That Yom Kippur is like Shabbos, not like Yom Tov. Oh, what about Rafam's argument? Anybody want to suggest what the Gemara in Kvisa says to argue with Rafam? The Rafam's argument is that if Yom Kippur you're allowed to, if you're not allowed to carry Yom Kippur, what difference does it make if Yom Kippur is a Shabbos or not? The answer is what? No. Here, that's a good way. No, he says like this, that the Gemara in Kvisa says that if the whole problem was Yom Kippur, since this is the essential avodah for Yom Kippur, you wouldn't need a drasha to permit it. Because the Torah says on Yom Kippur, you have to shecht, you have to sprinkle the blood. All of these things are not normal activities to be done on the Shabbat. But because it's Yom Kippur, it's permitted. But when Yom Kippur is a Shabbos, you might have said, wait a second, for Yom Kippur it's permitted, what about Shabbos? But the Meister, we don't pass like this, Rafam, and we push away the proof by saying there's a difference between the Yom Kippur cannot be an impediment, can't be a stop to do the avoid of Yom Kippur. That doesn't make any sense. But Shabbos of Yom Kippur could be. Okay. Says the Gemara weiter. Which tumah? What's the problem? He's pushing a higot off a cliff. If the one that we designated to take the higot becomes Tomei, nichnas Tomei la'azor, Meshach is allowed to walk into the azor to accompany the higot to take it out. Now we have one of these like strange Gemaras. What happened was Rabbi Lezer, which the Gemara tells us in the end of Sanhedrin, was one of the greatest Tanoim that we can imagine. Rabbi Lezer was the Rebbe of who, by the way? I once made a chart I should give out. I want to give out to people. Yes, Rabbi Lezer was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva never went to learn from Rabbi Lezer for many years. Does anybody know why? No, because Rabbi Lezer was put in the Chayim once because of Machlekas. When Rabbi Akiva came, as when he heard Rabbi Lezer was dying, he came into him and he spoke the last conversation of his life, the Gemara records in Sanhedrin. And one of the things Rabbi Lezer said to him is, you should know that from all the Torah that I know, you got less than what a dog can lick from the sea from me. Can you imagine such a thing? And that's Rabbi Akiva, which everything we have today, Mishnah, Sifos, Sefta, is all from Rabbi Akiva. Now, Rabbi Lezer had a shitta, a way of behavior that was he never answered the question unless he heard the answer from his Rebbe. So if you ask him a question which his Rebbe never talked about, he refused to answer. Instead of saying, I don't know, or my Rebbe never said it, what he used to do is avoid the question. Some people do this. But the Gemara now does this in a very strong manner. So we've gone through quickly, and then afterwards we'll examine maybe a bit better each one. Shalos Abelezer. Cholo. If the girl became not well, can you carry it on your shoulders? By the way, what's the din? Yes or no? Yes, very good. But he didn't hear it from his Rebbe. So the higot was so strong, it could carry me and you. So therefore the question is irrelevant. It was an avoidance. If a person is not well, what should you do? Can they send him with somebody else? Again, he avoided the question. Hey, let's all be well as you should all be well. They asked him another question. If they pushed him, and if they pushed the higot never died. Should he go down and kill the higot? Again, they didn't want to answer. All the enemies of Hashem should be pushed off cliffs. The Chachamim say, he got no well, like you just answered, Nakiva safe put on his shoulders. Said it was somebody else. You go down and you kill it if he never died. And now the Gemara continues with the more questions asked Rabbi Lezer, which Rabbi Lezer continuously avoided to answer. Shalos Rabbi Lezer. Is so and so deserved to get to Olam Haba or not? The question is, what did they mean? Rashi explains there was somebody that the Gemara doesn't say who it was. He was asking about somebody. And Rashi says, Shlomo ben David. They asked him about Shlomo. If you look in Tesis says two Malachim, and they were asking about either Avishalom or Shlomo HaMelech. And again, he never had the answer because his Rebbe never told him. You only asked him about so and so. What about so and so? Now, from here to quite a lot more, the Bach has got a different Gilsa, which is actually easier Gilsa. I'm going to stick to the Bach's Gilsa. It's very similar, but just an easier Gilsa to read. So he said, he didn't ask plenty. Are you allowed to save a sheep from a lion? You never asked me about saving a shepherd. Are you allowed to save a shepherd from a lion? You never asked me about the sheep. So here Rashi doesn't say anything. What was the question about the sheep and the shepherd and the lion? Tesis explains it's referring to the terrible aveh, unfortunately, that David HaMelech did, and that is that he took Bathsheba and had Uriah Hittite killed. There were two compartments to the Avera, taking Bathsheba, and the other part was having Uriah killed. And they were asking him, did David Melech sin with Bathsheba? Which the Chazal, the Novi came to him and compared it to sheep. The rich person has 4 sheep, and the poor man had no sheep, etc. And the shepherd is a reference to Uriah Chiti. That means, was David Melech really chayv misa for it or not? That's how Tos explains. Okay. Mamza, they asked him, Mamza ma'ulevish. Can a mamza be yovish? Ma'uleyabim. Can he do yibum? That means if a man dies, he leaves 2 sons. So if a man dies, he leaves no children, his brother does yibum. What happens if his brother is a mamza? Can his brother do yibum? By the way, the halacha is that a mamza is yovish and a mamza does do yibum. Ma'u losu despesa. Is a person allowed to put lime on his house? The question is, that is it wrong because of Zeichel Churban to put lime on your house? Ma'u losu despivui. Is a person obligated to put lime over the burial plots? This is a different question. That in the olden days, we were makbid that every burial plot should have lime on. If you look in the tzfas, you always see that blue or white paint. The reason is because we don't want Kohanim to walk with the truma and become tommy. But nowadays, that truma is to Rabbanon, do we have to invest the effort of putting lime on every burial plot? And what happened was, with all of these questions, he asked them another question to avoid it. That means you have to read the way the Bach does it is. As his basis, he said, you never asked me about what's this kidboy. Each time he asked them a different question, and he said, you never asked me this. You asked me this, you never asked me that. So they said to him, it's the word space, he never asked, he never answered anything which he never heard from his rabbi. Everybody did the same Aveva. If they ma'im misos and shava, why did they get 3 different punishments? So Rashi over here goes through the 3 punishments. Also, Rashi does it the same in our Torah. What were the 3 punishments? That Moshe Rabbeinu said to Shevet Levi, Mila Hashem Elai, and they went and took a sword. So that was Misa Sarf. Furthermore, there was a Mageifa. The Pasuk says there was a Mageifa. The Mageifa was from Hashem, right? And finally, oh, very good. What did he do? He ground the Egel into ash, into dust, and he put it into water. Rashi mentions it just before Sheni in this week's parasha. That's why the Po'ad Duma was also sprinkled into water. So there are 3 different kinds of punishments. If they manage the wisdom of a woman is only beplach, is only with weaving. A different mahalchim what he was trying to say. But it's interesting that Les himself in Kedushin holds you're not allowed to teach your daughter Torah. So therefore, in fact, he was not impressed. He was not interested in answering her. Many others got more Kabbalistic explanation as to why he said, okay. There's 2 machlokas. Why there were 3 different punishments? What did a person do to get it? So, if a person sacrificed or put on his, or that was shechted or put on his back, the side got killed by the Levim. Gofa for Nishik person hugged or kissed the Misa. Samach Belvovo, he was happy in his heart by a joycon, and what happened was he got the plague. So he got the water. And Ashur explains that simcha is something which is internal, and the punishment was also internal, that they would drink the water and it would cause the stomach to bloat. It was an internal illness which caused them to die. The Chofetz Chaim, by the way, in Shem Olam Chelik Beis mentions this more very briefly, and he says like this: that you see that there were people that got misa simply because of the fact that they rejoiced that other people were doing the Egel. Now we know Midah Tova Merubah. So if you hear about somebody that did a siyum, somebody up to yeshiva, somebody's learning, and you get joy when he's learning Torah, can you imagine how much schar you'll get? It's unbelievable. The Chofetz Chaim Shem Olam Chelik Beis, Perek Aleph, where he discusses the unbelievable schar a person gets just by rejoicing by the fact that somebody else is doing mitzvahs. Omar Yehuda. And the pasuk finishes off. What does it say? The entire Shevet of Levi did not do Avodah Zarah. He said it over. That's one of the things we praise Levi is what? Is that they killed out the family. So you see that he killed his own father. Now, how would he kill his own father if he was a Levi and Shevet Levi never did any Averos? Answers well. Aviv is Avi Imoy Me Yisroel, means a maternal grandfather. Many times a grandfather is called a father, and therefore it is possible to be Aviv Achiv Achim Imoy Me Yisroel, his brother, half brother from his mother's side. One of the Beis Yisroel, a grandson, is the meaning of the Beis Yisroel, and therefore it's possible to have a grandson who is not from Shevet Levi and to still be considered a son. Okay, we'll stop here. We're up to 4 lines of the wide lines. Okay, we're going to have this problem for a few.
That's why we're not going to start straight away.
No. That's all right. Just a bit.
No.
Have your
Yes, I've got what's so much to do with Naples Way.
yeah.